Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel as you see in the thumbnail. This is part 1 of What If Godlike Naruto was in Sekirei. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Muse Yubi smiled, humming a happy tune as she lathered her nude body up with soap. It was early in the morning, the sun had just risen a few hours ago, and despite how hectic and crazy yesterday had been, she couldn't be happier. Because she now had her ashikabi. Naruto truly was everything she wished for in an ashikabi. Not only was he kind, he was also very strong from what she had seen and felt. She remembered how she had woken up this morning, lying in her futon with the blonde, cuddled into his side with one of his arms wrapped around her waist. She remembered how good it felt to be in his arms, and the feel of his firm muscles as she pressed herself against him. Truly there was nothing in this world better than being close to her ashikabi. Once she was finished putting soap on her wet body, Muse Yubi used the movable shower head to rinse herself off, letting the water droplets and filmy soap run down her form. When she was finished, she went to get some shampoo for her hair, grabbing the bottle and unscrewing the lid before flipping it upside down and putting her hand under it. She frowned, however, when she squeezed the bottle and nothing came out. "I can't believe we're out. I could have sworn we had some yesterday," she said to herself. "Oh well, I'll just ask Naruto-sama where we have more." Turning off the shower, Muse Yubi walked out of the bathroom, not bothering to cover herself up. Naruto-sama had told her that he liked looking at her, and that was all she cared about. If he enjoyed seeing her, then she would gladly stay in the nude. Privately, of course. "Naruto-sama, we're all out of shampoo," Muse Yubi said as she walked into the kitchen, still soaking wet. Said blonde looked over from where he was making a breakfast of scrambled eggs. She smiled when she saw him admiring her form. For some reason, seeing him look at her with those slightly clouded eyes sent pleasant sensations through her body, and caused more heat to well up in between her legs. She would have to ask him if he knew why she felt that way sometime soon. Naruto blinked as he looked over to see his Sekirei, dripping wet and completely naked, walk into the room. His eyes noticed a small droplet of water on her bare skin and watched as it ran down the left side of her face, reaching her chin before dripping off. Because her bust were so big, the water ended up hitting her left breast instead of the floor, where it proceeded to move down in a trail, off to the side and in between the valley of her breasts. He lost sight of it for a second before it came out under her bosom and continued along its merry way, running over her flat stomach before reaching the apex of her crotch. Muse Yubi was clean-shaven, which was somewhat surprising because Naruto was sure the woman did not know how to use a razor. The small droplet of life-giving liquid finished its descent when it trailed over her inner thigh, moving down in an ever-so trail down her toned, mile-long legs, and ended when it trailed off of her small, dainty foot and onto the ground. If he didn't already known she was naive to the pleasure of the flesh, he would have sworn she was doing her best to kill him. Her words then registered in his ears, and he was just about to inform her that there was some shampoo under the cupboard in the bathroom, when the girl's left foot landed on the tile and she slipped due to her soaking the floor in water. "Whoa! What?" Muse Yubi screamed out as she lost her balance and began falling over. Naruto rushed over to her in an attempt to catch her. However, he had forgot to account for the water Muse Yubi had spilled on the floor when she began flailing about and ended up losing his own footing. They both fell to the floor in a slight heap, Naruto falling on his back and Muse Yubi falling on him. As a natural response, the blonde's arms wrapped around the Sekirei so she wouldn't be jostled and injured by their fall. "Are you alright, Muse Yubi?" asked Naruto after he had managed to get over his surprise at being surprised. It was rare that he actually forgot to take something into account, but had to admit that it had been so long since he had been in any situation even remotely like this that he couldn't really be blamed. "I think so," Muse Yubi said. She looked up slightly and saw Naruto looking at her with those concerned eyes again. It warmed her heart to see him looking at her like that. She gave him a smile that was bright enough to power Shinto Ito for a day. "Thank you for breaking my fall." Don't worry about, Naruto started slightly, his eyes moving from her own, twin brown orbs filled with warmth and innocence, to her lips. They looked very kissable right now, with their light pink and glossy shine. He didn't think Musubi wore lip gloss, she didn't have any other kind of makeup on, so he had no reason to assume she had put on any form of lip gloss. Perhaps they just had a natural sheen to them. Without even realizing it, Naruto started leaning in. "Are you okay, Naruto-sama? Your face is all red." And like a tub of ice being dumped onto him, Musubi's words stopped him cold. Shaking his head, the blonde tried to get up, an impossible task considering Musubi was still on him. Instead he ended up smacking his forehead into hers, eliciting an ow from the brunette Sekirei currently on top of him. Naruto himself found his own head smacking against the floor, bringing stars to his eyes. He lay there, groaning for what seemed like eternity, but in truth was only a split second, before his mind rebooted and he realized what he had almost done. "I'm so sorry, Musubi," he apologized to the girl rubbing her head. Musubi stopped the motion to look at him curiously. She tilted her head to the side, as if doing so would let her get a better look at him. It looked almost like she were trying to solve some kind of jigsaw and he was the puzzle. "Sorry for what?" she asked eventually, then her eyes lit up as she seemed to realize what he was talking about. At least, what she thought he was talking about. "Oh, don't worry about the hit your head just gave me. I've got a pretty hard head myself." Musubi knuckled her own head with her left hand and poked her tongue out from between her lips. Naruto smiled for a second, but then shook his head. "That wasn't what I was talking about," Naruto said with a shake of his head. Musubi stopped her current actions to look at him, and Naruto, unmindful of the girl above him, continued speaking. I almost kissed you. I mean, I know we did that in order for me to become your Ashikabi, but..." He sighed. "But I shouldn't have done that." Musubi's eyes once more became confused. "But why not? Why not?" Naruto blinked. Was this girl really asking him something like that? "Well, because, I mean, we've only just met each other, so it wouldn't be right for me to kiss you, right?" Sure, he had kissed women he had just met hours prior before, but all of those females had been one-night stands, women he had seduced for the sole purpose of sleeping with them. He didn't want to do that to Musubi, even if she was the most attractive female he had seen up close in years. It just felt wrong. Damn it, Naruto cursed to himself. How the hell is it that I've gone from trying to seduce a woman to thinking that the very act of seducing said woman was the most morally and ethically wrong thing I've ever thought about doing in my life? Seriously, how screwed up was he that his way of thinking could be irreversibly changed within a single meeting? Apparently pretty damn screwed up. Why does that matter? Once again, Musubi sounded confused. She looked at him with a quizzical gaze, her eyes roving his face as if searching for the answer to her own question on his person. They went back to his eyes a second later. "We might not be in a battle for me to use my Naruto, but I don't see what that has to do with you almost kissing me." Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but then frowned as one of the words Musubi had spoken caused him to pause. "Naruto," he tested the word out, and when he couldn't think of its meaning, looked back up at Musubi. "What's that?" "It's a special ability that we Sekirei have," the girl said with an enthusiastic smile. "First, the Ashikabi has to kiss their Sekirei. Then the Sekirei recites their Naruto. After that they can use their strongest attack." She finished her impromptu lesson on Sekirei abilities with a nod of her head. Naruto frowned. "So it's like a power boost then," he voiced, his tone sounding like he was asking a question. "By kissing I guess it's like when you first became my Sekirei." God, that sounded so weird to say out loud. Why was Musubi and everyone like her named after a bird? Couldn't they have been named after something cooler, like an orange velociraptor or something? "By kissing you, you gain a boost in power and can use your strongest attack after reciting your Naruto. Is that like some kind of chant or something? Yes. Musubi's head bobbed up and down emphatically. She looked almost like one of those bobbleheads Naruto had seen standing on the dashboard of cars. Whenever we kiss, it allows me to use my Naruto. I see. Naruto frowned, then shook his head. I suppose I can see why you wouldn't think much of kissing considering what you just told me. However, kisses are used for far more than just granting someone an increase in power. When shared between two people, a kiss is also seen as a sign of affection. Sign of affection. Musubi repeated, her eyes opened and she stared into his. Yes, when two people love each other, they often share kisses to show each other how much they love each other, Naruto said. This entire experience was becoming very surreal for the blonde shinobi. How many people in their lives could ever claim to have had to teach a fully grown woman about kissing? He couldn't be sure, but the blonde was almost positive no one else had ever had to do what he was doing just then. Oh, I get it. Musubi smiled, her eyes lighting up as she finally seemed to understand Naruto's words. If that's what you're worried about, then you don't need to worry at all. She told him passionately. Naruto-sama is my Ashikabi, I wouldn't have chosen you if I didn't love you, silly. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the last few words Musubi spoke. It seemed so strange to him, to hear her say that after they had just met barely even 2 days ago. He wanted to tell her that she couldn't love him, that it took a lot more time than a couple of days, or even a couple of months, before someone could possibly tell someone they loved them. For some reason, he couldn't bring himself to be so cruel. Instead, all he managed to get out was a mumbled, "Ah," before falling silent. If he were honest, Naruto would admit he was more than a little uncomfortable with this whole affair, especially with Musubi now proclaiming her love for him after they had only known each other for a day. He had originally been intending to help the girl find her Ashikabi and then let that person deal with her. Now though, he was her Ashikabi, which meant he was essentially stuck with the girl. And while the idea of being stuck with someone as beautiful as Musubi was not unpleasant, he still wasn't sure he wanted this. After all, 100 years from now Musubi would most likely be dead, and then he would once again be left alone. Despite the morbid and defeatist thought, Naruto was unable to deny the girl. For whatever reason, much as he wanted to tell her no, to tell her that they couldn't have any kind of relationship, the blonde found himself wanting to be with her just as much as she apparently wanted to be with him. He decided to rack it up to him being extremely lonely rather than the possibility that he might actually feel something for this girl. It would only hurt him if he allowed himself to become too attached. Naruto-sama. Hearing Musubi call his name, the blonde looked up to see her staring at him. He opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off when his Sekirei gave him a quick peck on the lips, not enough for him to feel more than a slight tug on his chakra, but enough for her wings to flare briefly, illuminating the room before fading once more. Yes, Musubi. Naruto said almost on reflex. It was strange how he could still react on reflexes like those. Having spent so little time around people, he would have thought that those kind of reflexive responses would have been stamped out of him. I love you, she said, and there was such conviction in her voice that whatever protest Naruto might have thought, died a painful and gory death before it could even form. I love you, so there is no need to worry about us just meeting or something like that. If Naruto-sama wants kisses, then all he has to do is kiss Musubi. Apparently finished talking, Musubi brought her hands up to cup his face and pulled his mouth to hers. The kiss started out simple enough, and the brunette Sekirei couldn't help but enjoy the feeling of her Ashikabi's lips against her own. They were so soft, so warm, and like his eyes seemed to connect her to Naruto in ways she had not thought possible. However, as they continued to keeping their lips locked, Musubi felt the desire for more, only she was unsure what exactly she should do. Fortunately for her, Naruto had been around for a while, long enough to pick up on cues when a woman wanted something and figure out what they wanted, even when they didn't know what that was themselves. Once again, chakra began to physically manifest into wings behind the brunette Sekirei as they kissed, the wings spreading out around the room. They conformed to the room itself, folding inwards as they pressed against the walls and ceiling. The two of them ignored it in favor of each other. Naruto licked Musubi's bottom lip, making the girl almost pull back in surprise at the contact. However, the blonde had placed a hand behind her head, so she couldn't break away in surprise. He had already figured out that she didn't know much about normal relationships, nor the meaning of physical affection, but it was becoming even more obvious just how inefficient her knowledge on this subject truly was. Being gentle and going slowly so he wouldn't freak her out, Naruto once again licked Musubi's lower lip. She still didn't have a clue on what to do, however, and the blonde took a more drastic measure. He pushed his tongue in between her lips and licked her teeth. This time the brunette gasped as she felt his tongue, opening her mouth and giving the blonde shinobi an opportunity to slip in. While she was surprised at first, when Naruto began to caress her tongue with his own, a moan escaped her throat at the pleasurable sensations he action brought. From there her own oral appendage seemed to almost move on its own, meeting the blonde's as they pushed against each other. As they continued their session, Musubi began gaining more confidence. She didn't have any experience, but she more than made up for it with a newfound enthusiasm. As Naruto marveled at how soft Musubi's lips felt, and how sweet she tasted, a part of him couldn't help but wonder. How long had it been since he had been with a woman? 1 year? 2. In retrospect, that wasn't a very long time, not for someone like him. However, it was long enough that when he was now presented with a perfectly willing female, Naruto found his mind and body slipping further and further into habit and hormones. While their mouths were engaged in an age-old dance, Naruto's hands wandered from rubbing up and down her torso, to her hips, then to her firm rear. He grasped her cheeks and began to knead them with the hands of someone who had become an expert at the art of sex, making Musubi moan. "Oh gods, Naruto-sama, that feels so good," she managed to pant out in between kisses. It was impressive. Despite hitting the 20-minute mark, neither one of them seemed ready to stop any time soon. The few times they had needed air, they would never truly break apart, instead giving each other intermittent pecks in between breaths to keep themselves from going cold, so to speak. "I don't know why, but that feels really, really good." Whereas the last time Musubi's words had been like dropping a bucket of ice on him, this time Naruto felt like someone had decided to drop him into the Arctic Circle in the middle of winter butt naked. He pulled his head back from their kisses and took several deep breaths to get his body under control. It didn't work very well. He would need a cold shower after this, but at least his mind was returning to him. And with the return of his mind, he felt another emotion, one that he was intimately familiar with in this day and age. Regret. We should probably stop," he said, cursing himself for nearly losing control of himself. He should be better than this, he was better than this. If nothing else, Naruto took great pride in his self-control. He had not survived all these millennia by being impulsive and thinking with something other than his head. Just what was it about this young woman that had caused him to lose himself like that? What? Why? Asked Musubi, her eyes growing big and watery. Her words brought Naruto's thoughts to a screeching halt and caused him to look at her. It was an action he would come to regret. "Did you not like it, Naruto-sama?" Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the puppy dog eyes being directed at him. He had never been able to resist those eyes before and could already feel them breaking any resolve he may have had now. "No, I loved it," he said quickly. Once more reacting on instincts long thought forgotten, Naruto pressed his lips against hers in a quick peck of reassurance, then pressed his forehead against hers in order to ensure they had skin contact. He stared into her eyes, so wide and innocent, yet with a touch of hurt. It was almost unnerving, How his heart lurched when he saw that pain and realized he had put it there. He didn't want to see that look on her face, it wasn't natural, his mind told him. Musubi was supposed to always be happy, always smiling and enjoying life. It was strange, he knew very little about her, yet somehow, he just knew instinctively that the look she had now was not natural for her. It has nothing to do with me not liking what we were doing, Naruto tried to explain. A part of him pointed out that he shouldn't need to explain himself, much as Musubi might say otherwise, they didn't know each other long enough to love the other. But that part was so small it might as well not exist. A mere wraith that whispered into the ear of one that could not hear it. The much larger part of him, which had suddenly sprung up out of nowhere, needed to give the woman still straddling him some kind of explanation. But I feel it would be inappropriate for us to go any further right now, since we just met and I still don't much about you. Plus you don't know what sex is. Sex. The look from before had vanished so quickly it was startling. No longer looking like someone had just killed her puppy in a satanic ritual, Musubi looked curious. Her head was tilted to the side, lips pursed slightly in thought as her warm brown orb stared at him with unbridled curiosity. It was a look that set Naruto's blood racing, and once more he had to viciously beat back these newly acquired feelings with a savage vengeance. Dear God, was anything she did not sexy? As his mind was trying to come to terms with his newly reawakened libido, it managed to finally register what Musubi had said. Cue the bucket of cold water. Are you telling me you've never heard of sex before? He asked almost nervously. It was bad enough that he had nearly lost control of himself in such an unsightly way, but to have almost starting something sexual in nature when this girl knew nothing of sex made his blood run cold. Even if Musubi was perfectly willing, it was far too close to rape for him to be comfortable. Of course I've heard of sex, Musubi declared, holding a fist a few inches above her head upon her declaration. Less than a second later a sheepish look crossed over her face as she once more knuckled her head and stuck out her tongue. I just don't know what sex is. If it weren't for the fact that Naruto was lying on the ground, he would have face faulted. As things stood, he couldn't do that, so instead he just palmed his face in exasperation. I remember my adjuster telling me about it once, I think. Musubi looked up at the ceiling with a thoughtful expression, the index finger of her left hand poking her lips. After a second she nodded once. Yes, I definitely remember my adjuster trying to tell me about sex. Then how come you don't know what sex is? Asked Naruto, sounding slightly irritated. Honestly, this whole situation was beginning to border more on the ridiculous than the unreal. Ah, well, Musubi rubbed the back of her head as another sheepish look crossed her face. Musubi was so excited when she learned that sex was something she would be eventually doing with her ashikabi that she forgot to listen. There were no words to describe what Naruto was feeling. He could have tried, but all that would have done was give him a headache. There was something oddly familiar about this situation, perhaps not in the same context, or even the same subject, but Musubi's statement just now reminded him of someone he had known a long time ago but couldn't remember who. It would come to him in time, and it would be a startling revelation when it did. So, before he even had the chance to contemplate anything else, an eager Musubi was in his face, so close her nose was touching his. What's sex, Naruto-sama? Really, how did one respond to that? That's, just another way of showing affection, Naruto tried to explain nervously, edging his face as far away from Musubi's as possible while doing so. Considering he was already laying down, it was nowhere near far enough in his estimation. Worse still, whenever Naruto leaned back, Musubi leaned forward. Eventually, there was no more room for Naruto to move his head, seeing how it was pressed against the floor. I'll tell you about it after we find an apartment to live in, he edged, hoping it would get the uncomfortably close girl to halt this line of questioning. Right now, We have things to do today, so we should get ready for the day. Okay, Musubi said. She was a little sad that they wouldn't continue. It was clear that she wasn't quite satisfied with his lack of explanation on sex, but was at least willing to defer that conversation to a later time. Hopefully by the time they found an apartment to live in, she will have forgotten this entire conversation had taken place. So there's some extra shampoo in the cupboard under the sink, Naruto said, thankful that they were no longer crossing uncharted territory. He could only pray that he never had to deal with something so awkward again. I think that's what you were looking for before we got sidetracked. Oh, right. Musubi stood and began walking towards the bathroom as Naruto stood up and moved back over to the stove, thankful when he saw that the food had somehow not been burned during his and Musubi's 20-minute make-out session. Naruto-sama. Musubi said, getting the blonde's attention again. He forced his eyes to meet hers. He'd had more than enough sexual encounters of the Musubi kind to fuel fantasies hot enough to write a novel on this encounter alone. Just to be sure, you did like it when I kissed you, right? Naruto gave her a smile. He still wasn't sure about, well, this whole situation he found himself in, but his relationship with Musubi was something he was particularly concerned about. However, much as he may want to take things slow, or not take things anywhere at all, the blonde found himself having trouble not responding in a positive fashion. Yes, I liked kissing you. And I can kiss you more, right? There was a pause, before Naruto sighed and gave a resigned smile. Whenever you want. Musubi gave him a smile that literally lit up the entire room, and Naruto found that, despite the fact that he was concerned about whether or not the situation would come back to bite him in the ass, he couldn't find it in himself to regret this decision. XOX. Naruto couldn't keep the smile off his face as he and Musubi walked out of the hotel and down one of the many streets towards the shopping district. His Sekirei was wearing her usual outfit, which she only had one pair of. That was the reason the blonde had decided to take the brunette to the shopping district. While he got the feeling that Musubi was not like most females and likely wouldn't care if she had more clothes or not, he figured giving her more clothing wouldn't hurt. Especially if yesterday's incident was going to be a normal occurrence for her. Besides, unlike most men who hated shopping with a female, Naruto had long since learned the value of it thanks to Ino. And Koyuki. And Tamari. Tenten. Anko. He shivered when he remembered the one time he went shopping with the snake mistress. It had been both mind-numbingly frightening and so erotic that the blonde was both mentally scarred and so aroused that they nearly had sex in the changing room. They probably would have too were it not for some idiot interrupting them. He shivered again, remembering how the man had gotten Anko to sick her snakes on him. The poor guy had been dropped off at the hospital with the worst case of blue balls Tsunade had ever seen. Ah, good times. However, going out shopping for clothing wasn't the reason he was smiling. No, his reason was really just because of the brunette Sekirei who was holding his hand while they walked, an infectious smile on her face. He could literally feel her presence connected to his own chakra network. She was radiating a pure joy that came from being with him. The feeling he got from her was that she was happy just to be in his presence. Like so long as she had him, nothing else mattered. It was surprisingly infectious, and Naruto simply found that he couldn't help but be happy when in the presence of such joy. While he only had the basic knowledge on what Sekirei and Ashikabus were, he was beginning to suspect that some kind of bond had formed between them when they kissed. The way her chakra was latching onto his own made the theory plausible. He would need more information before he could truly be sure, but he was positive they had formed some kind of feedback loop that allowed for the flow of emotions to be exchanged between the two of them. How else could he explain his sudden increase in emotions? Or the fact that in spite of having just met Musubi, he was already growing attached to her in ways he had not felt since the beginning of his life. In his mind, that was the only explanation for this strange phenomenon. A part of him would admit that bothered him, a big part of him actually. That there could be something so powerful like this bond, that he could bond to another in such a way that it brought forth a wellspring of emotions he had not felt in thousands of years. It was unnerving. And yet, for some reason, Naruto still couldn't find it in himself to complain at the moment, though he was sure that would change soon. He looked over at the young woman holding his hand again and gave her a curious glance. It's so odd. I've spent so many years avoiding human contact as much as possible without living in the wilderness, and yet after just a single day with this girl I feel like I never want to leave her side. How was that possible? Was this another part of the bond they now shared? These questions ran through Naruto's head in quick succession. It was unfortunate, but he didn't have an answer. Even more unfortunate, he doubted Musubi would have the answers for him. Thus he shunted those thoughts to the side for now. They wouldn't do him any good at the moment, and if he kept thinking about them Naruto was sure he would go insane. Musubi noticed his gaze on her, for she turned to look at him and after noticing his smile decided to grace him with one as well. I'm really excited we're going shopping, Naruto-sama. I've never done that before. Really? So you didn't pick out the clothes you're wearing now? Asked Naruto. Oh no, the professor picked them out for me, Musubi said cheerfully. She blinked however, when a growl emanated from the blonde's throat at the mention of that man. She looked at him to see a slightly angry look on his face and gave a worried frown. Are you all right, Naruto-sama? I didn't say something wrong, did I? No, you didn't. Sorry to startle you, I just had something in my throat, Naruto lied, taking a deep breath to calm himself down. He didn't want to let the girl know how much the thought of that man being near Musubi bothered him. Even after just one meeting, and not even in person, Minaka reminded Naruto of some of the most vicious tyrants he had ever met. Worse even, while men like Madara had been delusional bastards who wanted to take over the world, at least that man had ambition and a reason to do so. Even if his reason was stupid. Minaka just seemed to enjoy playing with people's lives like it was some kind of game. That more than anything else was what bothered him. He simply couldn't figure out the man's endgame. Was all this just some form of entertainment to the president of MBI? Was this really just a game, as the man had put it, that he had put together for his own amusement? Right now, that was all Naruto was seeing, the actions of a sick man who enjoyed toying with others. However, he didn't want Musubi to know his thoughts. She was so innocent, he didn't want to taint her views of the world and the people in it with his own jaded eyes. When he was sufficiently calm he gave the brunette a bright grin. Let's go shopping. Okay. Musubi cheered. She blinked. Ah, I almost forgot. She stuck her hand in the obi that was keeping her Miko-like clothing together. She pulled out a card of some kind and smiled as she gave it to Naruto. This card came with the clothes. We can use it to go shopping. MBI members card, Naruto read with a frown. This is a fingerprint recognition card that acts like a credit card. That was some pretty high-level tech for a simple credit card. He wasn't even sure how the fingerprint recognition thing would work. It's got no money limit on it. Huh. Isn't it great, Naruto-sama? Asked Musubi with a smile. Now we don't need to worry about money when we shop. Well, we didn't really need to worry about money anyways. He was rich after all, what was a few billion yen to him? But it is nice that we won't have to spend our own cash at the stores we go to. We'll be able to use it for other, more important things. As Musubi began pulling Naruto along with her, the blonde's head snapped up as he felt a presence watching them. Looking to his left he saw a young woman, a very beautiful young woman whose breasts were even larger than Musubi's, which he had been sure was impossible, with dark purplish black hair, staring at them as they walked by. She was wearing a very short Chinese-style dress with loose cross-stitching along her shoulders, a pentagon-shaped hole in the center that showed off some of her cleavage, and sleeves that were cut down the center halfway up her biceps, allowing the fabric to flare out behind her and billow in the wind. Her outfit was finished off by a pair of expensive-looking sunglasses. The woman lowered her shade slightly to reveal a pair of brown eyes. As they met Naruto's blue ones, the blonde blinked a couple of times before shaking his head. Looking back at the woman, he offered a smile and waved at her with his free hand, causing the woman's eyes to widen slightly in surprise. Naruto and Musubi walked past her, and the dark-haired woman took her glasses off fully and watched as the pair turned the corner. That girl was a winged Sekirei, and that man, he's her Ashikabi, but something feels different about him than the other humans I've met. Shaking her head, she sighed and turned back to continue on her way. Whatever, the Sekirei plan has nothing to do with me. Naruto-sama, Musubi said, getting the blonde's attention. When he looked at her, she asked, "Did you know that woman?" "No," Naruto admitted with a shrug. "But she was looking at us, so I figured it would be a nice gesture to wave at her. Now, on to the shopping district. XOX. Are you sure you don't want me to carry these clothes, Naruto-sama?" asked Musubi, watching as her Ashikabi held 8 bags of clothing they had bought in his left hand. He didn't seem to be struggling with the load, but she still looked concerned about him carrying all of her clothing. It was hers after all. He shouldn't have to carry them. "I'm pretty strong, so I could carry those really easily." They had just finished shopping and Naruto had gotten her an assortment of different clothing. They had bought several pairs of tight shorts that Musubi seemed to like. Bloomers, Naruto had recognized them as. He was surprised they had even sold those kinds of clothes, considering they were made for schoolgirl gym classes. Musubi had liked them since they offered freedom of movement when fighting. Along with the bloomers, they had bought several pairs of shorts of various lengths and cuts, a couple shirts, which included tank tops, tube tops, and any clothing that was more tight-fitting, and couple of skirts that opened on the sides so they wouldn't hinder her movement. And while Musubi didn't know it, he had also gotten her a few dresses and kimonos that he thought she would look nice in as a present. "What kind of gentleman would I be if I let a lady carry her own clothing?" asked Naruto, giving her a smile and a wink. The question was rhetorical, which became obvious as the blonde continued, saying, "Besides, I may not look it, but I'm pretty strong myself." I know that, Naruto-sama," Musubi said with a slight pout. "But I also want to help you out. It's Musubi's duty as your Sekirei." Naruto shook his head. "As your Ashikabi, I believe it's my duty to help you when I can, not the other way around. After all, you're the one who's being forced to fight in this game that Minako guy forced on us." He still wasn't quite sure about this whole Sekirei plan thing. He knew next to nothing about this game still. All he could get was that it sounded like something out of that Mortal Kombat video game he had played before. Yet even though the blonde himself was not sure about his intentions for this game, he recognized that there would be others who were. There was no telling when he and Musubi would be drawn into a fight, and that meant, whether he liked it or not, he was as much a part of this game as anyone else. With nary a sound, the blonde shook his head and continued his previous train of thought. "Therefore, I should be the one helping you with whatever I can, even if it's only with little things like carrying your newly bought clothes." Musubi's eyes grew big and watery as she felt her heart swell up in her chest. "I really do have the best Ashikabi around. Naruto-sama, you're such an amazing person. So kind, and caring. You make me feel this warmth inside of my chest when you say things like that." A sweat drop formed on Naruto's head as he listened to Musubi's praise of him. He really wasn't sure why she got so worked up about his words. He had been making claims like that ever since he was 12, long before she had ever been born. Then again, no one in this world, including her, were around when he was 12, and thus they couldn't know that this was more or less how he had always been. Even with time, it seemed that some things about him would never change. And in other breaking news, the strange overgrowth of plants at the botanical garden is currently under investigation by MBI's active cooperation. Naruto and Musubi looked up at the screen when the news report came in. "I wonder what happened in that garden to cause all those plants to grow," the blonde said as an image of the botanical garden on the screen, which had such an insane amount of foliage growth that it looked like the Shoutei Hokage had gotten trigger happy with his Mokuton ability. It could be another Sekirei, Musubi suggested, placing a finger to her lips as she looked at the screen curiously. There's a lot of Sekireis with unique powers out there, like those lightning users. So it's possible there's a Sekirei with Mokuton abilities, mumbled Naruto, frowning in confusion. Emoku, ton, said Musubi, blinking as she tilted her head to the side as if doing so would help her figure out what the blonde was talking about. Nothing, anyways, let's find a place where we can stay, Naruto said, tugging on the hand she had clasped with his free one. Come to think of it, maybe it would have been better if we went shopping after securing an apartment. Meh, oh well. XOX. Up above the two unsuspecting shoppers on a roof, Homura watched the two with a frown. There's that new Ashikabi again. I shouldn't really care about winged Sekirei, but there's something off about that man she is bonded to. He watched as the blonde said something that made the brunette Sekirei really happy enough that she began kissing him. Homura blinked as the woman's powers flared, wings grew out of her back, only to disperse less than a second later as the kiss ended. At least they seemed to be getting along well. As he continued watching the pair talk and laugh, his eyes widened as the blonde's eyes landed on him. For a second his heart hammered in his chest. His left hand reached up to scratch his chest before he seemed to know what he was doing. It wasn't until the blonde's eyes passed him over that he realized his actions and forced himself to stop, bringing his hand back down to his side. Looking back down again, he saw that the blonde and number 88 were on the move again. He sighed in relief and released the breath that he hadn't even realized he was holding. Homura. Turning his head, the white-haired Sekirei saw a young woman with long blonde hair and blue eyes. She was outfitted in a black dress with a white underdress, which showed off her cleavage. The woman was also wearing a choker on her neck, and had long brown boots with black stockings. She was a very beautiful woman, with a lovely and mature figure. A beautiful, round face with full red cupid bow lips and a small nose. She had slender shoulders that and large breasts, which moved into a thin waist containing a perfectly flat stomach. Her hips flared out, defined and well proportioned, and she had a very lovely peach-shaped derriere that set the precedence for her gorgeous, mile-long legs. Were she not a Sekirei like him, and after his life, Homura might have considered trying to see if she was his Ashikabi. Tsukai amai. Today the two of us shall settle our dispute once and for all. Tsukai amai said, pointing a finger at him. Let us see who is stronger. No thanks, I've got some business to take care of today, so I'll have to take a rain check on that. Homura lit a fire on his finger and cast it into the ground, creating a large explosion that forced Tsukai amai to jump back and cover her face. You should stop worry about fighting me and try to find an Ashikabi to serve. Wait. Come back, coward, shouted Tsukai amai. However, when the fire from the explosion cleared, Homura was nowhere to be seen. Unacceptable. Thou shall not accept it? Ashikabi are no better than common monkeys. Thou shall not let myself be debased by a man. Instead thou shall close his eyes to the world so that thou might keep my purity. XOX. Achoo. Are you all right, Naruto-sama? Asked Musubi as the blonde pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket to wipe his nose. You're not catching a cold, are you? If you are, I could make you a warm bath when we get home and wash your back. I'm fine, Naruto smiled. The idea of taking a bath with this girl was pleasant. He didn't know if he had any intentions of doing something so intimate with Musubi yet, or ever, but he would be a fool to deny that the thought didn't invoke a bodily reaction that all males possessed when confronted with such an offer. I think someone was just talking about me. Era. Musubi blinked, her expression going from worried to confused. What does sneezing have to do with someone talking about you? Is this another one of those figure of speech things you keep talking about? Because if so, I'm not sure I understand it. Not quite, Naruto said. Frowning, he tried to think of the best way to inform his Sekirei of what should more or less be instinctive knowledge of linguistics. When someone sneezes without an obvious cause, it is generally perceived as a sign that someone was talking about the sneezer at that very moment. He scratched the back of his head and grinned. I don't remember when that particular belief came about, but it's been around for a long time. Oh, I think I understand now. Muse Yubi said with a smile, palming the fist of her left hand into her open right. She gave Naruto a look of awed adoration. It made the blonde more than a little uncomfortable. You're so smart, Naruto-sama. Thanks, I guess, Naruto chuckled nervously as they began walking again. It probably had to once more do with the fact that he had spent so little time interacting with others these days, but hearing Muse Yubi compliment him caused him more than a little embarrassment. It was so strange. When he had been a kid he would have lapped up the praise she was giving him like a man dying of thirst gulped down water. Now it just made him uncomfortable. It happened as they were turning a corner. Naruto was still slightly embarrassed by his Sekirei's praise over something that, in all honesty, was pretty common knowledge. Because of that he didn't even notice the person walking in the opposite direction until they had run into each other. With a resounding oof, from the person he bumped into, Naruto stumbled back before managing to steady himself. Thankfully for him he had a strong grip on his bags, so they didn't go flying off. However, the books the girl that had run into him was carrying did. Oh, no, the girl said as she dropped to her knees and began to pick the books up. Both Naruto and Muse Yubi decided to help her. Setting his own bags down, the blonde dropped to his knees along with his Sekirei and they began grabbing the books, picking them up one by one. While they did that, the blonde shinobi got a good look at the girl. She had long red hair with side plaits and was outfitted in a white dress, slits on her legs high enough to see her shapely rear, a rhombus cutout that revealed her cleavage, and was also wearing detached sleeves that resembled a cheongsam and glasses. She was very pretty, on par with Muse Yubi even, though she looked a little nerdy with her glasses. Still, Naruto almost felt like it was a part of her charm. Here you go, Naruto said as he handed the girl the books he and Muse Yubi had collected. Are you alright? Asked Muse Yubi. Thank you, and yes I am, the girl smiled at the pair. Her eyes traveled to Muse Yubi for a second, then landed back on Naruto. She studied him for a moment, long enough for the blonde to realize that she was looking at him with far more intensity than she had Muse Yubi. Before he could begin to get too nervous, however, the girl stood up and gave him one last smile. Thanks again. Naruto and Muse Yubi watched as she walked past. Both of them saw her Sekirei mark. Huh, so she's another Sekirei, the blonde said. He picked up the bags he had set down, making sure he had a secure grip on them as he did so. Looks like it, Muse Yubi agreed with a slightly despondent gaze. She looked over at Naruto, more specifically the bags in his hand, then back over to the Sekirei as she disappeared around the corner. It's too bad we're already doing something. I would have loved to fight her. I'm sure you would have, Naruto replied dryly. However, right now we need to get these back to the hotel, then try and find a suitable place to live. He began walking up, forcing Muse Yubi to follow him. Let's go, Muse Yubi-chan. Muse Yubi smiled as she caught up to him and walked alongside him. Right. XOX. It took several more hours before Naruto found a suitable place to live. While Naruto was not picky when it came to how he lived, there had been more than one occasion in which he had been forced to sleep in caves and jungles before. There were some things that made it hard for him to get an apartment. The biggest reasons among those was that MBI owned almost all of the apartment complexes. Finding an apartment that was not owned by the large conglomerate corporation was even more difficult than finding a needle in a haystack, and more along the lines of trying to find a specific grain of sand in the middle of the desert. Renting out a hotel was easy. All you had to do was give your name and some cash and presto, Instant room. There was no need to give any extra information, no questions asked except for how long you planned on staying. It was normally very easy for him to get a hotel room and then disappear without anyone being the wiser. Yet even then MBI had found him, which meant he needed to be even more cautious when finding a place to live. Unfortunately, all of the apartment complexes were not only owned by MBI but required detailed information that Naruto either wasn't willing to give, or simply didn't have. As far as the world was concerned, Uzumaki Naruto didn't exist. It was just a name on a fake ID that Naruto had spent a lot of money getting forged and the information being added into the appropriate channels so anyone looking for him would find a perfectly legit looking false lead. He had never stayed in any one place for long. His longest stay had been in England when he spent several years going to college for the hell of it, and that had been over 40 years ago. He had no taxes because quite simply he didn't have a job. He was a wanderer, traveling from one place to the next with nothing more than the clothes on his back. The simple fact was, more than half of the information he was required to fill out was information that he didn't have, and explaining why would have been impossible without blowing his cover. Fortunately, the blonde had managed to find a sign hung up on a fence in a residential area for a boarding house that had several rooms open for rent. Looking at the typical two-story Japanese house, Naruto felt slightly more at home than he would in a more modern apartment. No matter how long it had been since the elemental nations existed, the architecture that had somehow continued on through the ages always held the most appeal to him. "Ah, it's such a nice-looking house," Musubi said with a smile. Naruto chuckled at the girl's enthusiasm. "I can always count on Musubi to be cheerful no matter what." The girl was like a breath of fresh air. Her naivete and good cheer had a way of setting him at ease despite them having just met. Maybe she was beginning to grow on him after all. "We still need to check the inside first, and we need to see if the landlord would accept us," he reminded her. "Oh, right. Then let's go." Musubi pumped her fists into the air before grabbing Naruto's hand and beginning to walk up to the door. The blonde looked at the girl in amusement as she rapped her fist against the door 3 times, then began to wait. The door opened a few seconds later to reveal a slender woman with long purple hair, tied with a white ribbon. She was wearing the traditional attire of a Miko that consisted out of a purple hakama, a white haori with a sash-like belt and wooden sandals. She was incredibly beautiful, not just her figure and face, but also the way she held herself seemed to enhance her already enchanting features. The woman before them held herself with a natural grace and elegance that not even the most expensive of geisha could hope to achieve. Even the most talented of dancers would have been unable to replicate the way she held herself. In fact, there were likely only a few people in the entire world who could hold themselves with even a modicum of the gracefulness this woman did. Naruto doubted most people would even recognize the way she held herself, other than to note that there was something different about her. The only reason he recognized the way she held herself because he had seen it many times in various women throughout his life, though none had possessed it recently. Hers was the grace of a warrior, born and bred on the battlefield. The Lavenderette looked at the pair of them for a few seconds, giving them each what the blonde recognized as intense scrutiny. To the casual observer it would look like she was just looking at them, but Naruto could see the sharp glint she held within those purple orbs. They were looking at him and Musubi like one would study a potential threat. The moment lasted for only a second before the woman seemed to deem that they were not a threat, and less than a second later she was giving them both a beautiful smile. "Hello, can I help you too? We're looking for a place to live." Musubi cheered before Naruto could even open his mouth, giving her free hand a fist pump into the air. The other one, the one holding onto Naruto's hand, squirmed slightly in the blonde's loose grip. "Oh," the woman said with an amused smile. She gracefully hid her mouth behind the sleeves of her kimono as a soft giggle escaped her lips. "I see, so I take it you two wish to become residents of Maison Izumo." "Yep." Naruto scratched his cheek as he grinned at his Sekirei's enthusiasm. Looking back at the purple-haired female, he said, "I've been looking for a place to live, but have been having trouble getting one. Because I've only been in Tokyo for 2 days and haven't been able to get a job yet, most complexes won't let me stay there, even if I give them a down payment. We were hoping you would let us stay here. It was a carefully crafted lie, a white lie to be sure, but still a lie. He could have probably found a decent apartment by now, but he refused to live anywhere where MBI could have a potential spy put in place. He still knew very little about the Sekirei plan, or the company itself as a whole, and until he did, Naruto wanted to keep as far away from anything with possible MBI relations as possible. That was the reason he had chosen to see if he could get himself and Musubi to become residents of Maison Izumo. He had noticed it on the sign for the boarding inn, how MBI cards were not a viable form of payment to live here. To Naruto that meant whoever owned the boarding inn either had their own problems with MBI, or simply did not want to involve themselves in the large company. Either way, it meant that Maison Izumo was unlikely to have any affiliation with the large pharmaceutical corporation. The woman stared at the grinning blonde for a moment before bowing her head lightly. We do offer housing here for a monthly fee of 50 yen per room. However, I must ask, are the two of you in any kind of trouble that I should know of? Naruto and Musubi blinked, looked at each other, blinked again, then looked back at her. I don't think so, the blonde said carefully. At least, not that I know of. We did have a run-in with some girls a few days ago, but I don't think they'll bother us again. He paused, blinking in curiosity for a moment. Would us being in some kind of trouble affect whether or not we're allowed to stay here? Oh no, not at all, the woman replied with a kind smile. My husband believed in never turning a person away, even if they were in some kind of trouble. I just wanted to know as a simple precaution. Your husband sounds like a good man, Naruto said. Is he the landlord here? The woman shook her head, a sad smile crossing her face. No, he was, but my husband died a few years ago. Oh. Naruto looked down in shame and rubbed his arm with his free hand. Great, now he felt like a jerk for bringing her husband up. I'm terribly sorry, I had no desire to bring up past wounds. It's all right, the woman said with a slightly sad smile. It's not like you could have known, so don't beat yourself up over it. Her personality brightened a moment later as she opened the door and led the pair into the house. Now, I am the landlady, Asama Mia. We currently have 2 rooms available on the 2nd floor. As I said before, all payments are made in increments of 50 yen monthly. So long as you can pay, you will be allowed to live here. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and this is Musubi, the blonde said by way of introduction, then gave the landlady a formal bow. Please, look out for us. Pleased to meet you. Musubi said with a cheery smile, completely disregarding any and all decorum. Mia giggled at the other woman's enthusiasm. Very pleased to make your acquaintance as well. As for your payments, they're fine, Naruto said with a smile as he looked at the paper walls and tatami flooring that used to be typical of a Japan house. The place held a peaceful atmosphere that he could appreciate. We can pay that easily. I was honestly expecting to pay more to live in such a nice place. Oh no, Mia said with a smile. As I said, I would never turn someone who needed help away, and that includes if they have a money problem. Now then, there are a few rules that you must abide by if you are to live here. I don't approve of violence in this household, so I don't want any of you getting into any fights with the other people here. I think we can manage that, Naruto said. Just then Musubi began sniffing as she caught the smell of a delectable scent. What's that smell? She asked, her mouth beginning to water. Mia giggled. I hope it's not terrible because I'm cooking dinner. In fact, you two are just in time because it will be done in just a few minutes. Almost as if in hearing the woman's words, Musubi's stomach let out its earth-rumbling growl, causing Naruto to sweat drop and Mia to giggle some more. XOX. Itadakimasu. Musubi stuck the first piece in her mouth, chewed it, and then swallowed. There was a slight pause as the girl in shrine maiden clothing seemed to be making an attempt at determining whether she liked the food or not. A moment later, it was clear that she did when a large smile came to her face while tears streamed down her eyes. This is so good. Naruto, Mia, and the white-haired man sitting with them all looked at the girl with various reactions as she took her first bite of food. Naruto merely shook his head, already used to the antics of his Sekirei. To his left, Mia hid her smiling mouth gracefully behind her kimono sleeve and giggled. Kaguri just raised an eyebrow, only sparing the girl a brief moment of his attention before beginning to eat again. As Muzbai began eating more, she absently spoke up again. "Ah! It's so delicious. This is one of the best meals ever." "Don't speak with your mouth full," Mia chided the girl as she used her chopsticks to take some food into her own mouth. Musubi looked abashed, but didn't slow down the pace of her eating. She did stop once, however, just enough to say, "Sorry," before she went back to her food. "Mao, is it even better than mine, Musubi-chan?" asked Naruto, sticking his lips up in a pout as his eyes began to quiver. Musubi looked up at him inquiringly, her eyes blinking as her mind began registering his words. After a second or two she seemed to realize what he had said, and her eyes widened as she began waving her hands back and forth in a defensive manner as she tried to reassure him that his food was better than Mia's. "No. Of course not. Naruto-sama's cooking is the best, because Naruto-sama's the one who made it for Musubi," Musubi said. She placed her hands over her heart and nodded. "Anything made by you, will always be Musubi's favorite. When I eat your cooking it's almost like I can feel your love in it, and that is what makes your cooking so wonderful." Naruto's cheeks colored as he turned his head. Wow, this girl really knew how to lay it on thick. Were it not for the fact that he knew she was too naive to know the kinds of reactions her words can cause, he would have thought she was trying to butter him up or something. I was only kidding," he said, scratching his cheek with an index finger. Musubi blinked several times as she tilted her head and looked at him curiously, while Mia covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. As the blonde looked away from Musubi's intensely sincere stare, his eyes caught sight of the other occupant sitting with them. A young man that Naruto felt was perfectly matched the description of a Bishonen pretty boy. He had messy white hair, brown eyes, and that really lithe body type that most pretty boys had. "Can I help you?" asked the man with the raised eyebrow, grimacing a bit as he absently scratched his chest. "I don't think we were introduced yet." Naruto noticed the look on his face, and almost frowned, but managed to catch himself just in time. The blonde got the feeling the expression the other male possessed wasn't necessarily because of him but something else. So he put on a smile and made to introduce himself. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto. And I'm number 88, Musubi," said the brunette Sekirei. Were it not for the fact that doing so would have given even more away, Naruto would have face-palmed. Didn't this girl understand the meaning of discretion? "It's a pleasure to meet you." The white-haired man chuckled a little, seemingly unbothered by the naive Sekirei's words. Perhaps he was ignoring them as one of the girl's quirks. "I'm Kaguri, nice to meet you too." Just then the sound of footsteps came from down the hall and a voice whined, "Ah, I'm so hungry." Naruto looked up with everyone else to see yet another well-endowed young woman with long, dark brown hair. She had a ponytail on the left side of her hair and let the rest fall down behind her back. She had brown eyes and like every other girl Naruto had met so far had a very developed figure. She was also only wearing a pair of panties and a frilly pink shirt that showed off a lot of cleavage and had a small purple bow tied to the front. "Oh, we have visitors," the woman said, looking at Naruto and Musubi. "Uzume, how many times have I told you not to come out of your room dressed like that?" asked Kaguri. "Well, at least I'm in panties now," Uzume countered in a way that said she really didn't care if anyone saw her naked. It also let Naruto know that this girl had some kind of exhibitionist streak. She walked further in and sat down next to Kaguri, where she began eating. Actually, Musubi-chan and I aren't visitors, Naruto said, causing Uzume to look up from her meal to stare at him. We're your new housemates. I'm Naruto, and that's Musubi. Oh, a pleasure to meet you too then, Uzume said with a smile. You'll find that this is a pretty nice place. The only problem is that this place is kind of beat up and worn down, which means only crazies and weirdos live here. She gave the two new tenants a wink, so we're always looking for more normal tenants. Oh really? Asked Mia as an odd sense of dread and death filled the air. Naruto was almost positive he saw purple energy being emitted from the pleasantly smiling woman as she looked at Uzume, who had begun to sweat under the woman's sweet yet dangerous smile. But what? Yeah, I mean, because this place has so much character we need a variety of types, Uzume corrected herself hastily. The feeling of dread vanished from the air and the brunette breathed a sigh of relief. Meh, normal is highly overrated in my opinion, Naruto said with a grin. Everyone looked over at him but he just shrugged. Normal people are boring, they have no sense of fun and they're all the same. I shudder to think what this world would be like if everyone were normal. Come to think of it, can someone even be considered normal? I mean, everyone is different from each other, right? So the concept of normal doesn't really exist, because there's simply no basis to categorize someone as normal. The rest of the people in the room looked at the blonde like he had grown a second head. Musubi was looking at him curiously while scratching the back of her head in confusion, Kaguri had raised an eyebrow, and Uzume just looked plain lost. The only person who wasn't confused and / or consternated was Mia. I agree with you, she said with a giggle. Things wouldn't be as interesting if we didn't have so many different people in this world. I'm glad to see someone understands me, Naruto chuckled. Thankfully no one seemed to notice the hint of bitterness that flavored his laugh. Not that he had expected them to. In the long years of his life, Naruto had created hundreds of different personalities to use whenever they suited him. He could switch them at random, mixing and matching personality traits to suit his purposes. It was a skill he had acquired in order to blend into society, a necessity considering how populated the earth now was. Dinner passed uneventfully after initial introductions were made. Conversation was sparse and erratic, with Naruto asking his new housemates some basic questions about themselves and answering them in turn. So you're a world traveler, asked Uzume as the blonde told her and the others a little about himself. She seemed to be the most interested in learning more about him. Though Musubi was also paying close attention whenever the blonde spoke about himself. That's right. Before coming here to Tokyo I lived in America, Naruto said after swallowing a mouthful of food. And before that I lived in Europe. Man, that's so cool, Uzume said with a sigh. She looked a tad annoyed, though he could tell it wasn't at him but something else. I've always wanted to travel. I'm sure you'll get the chance to eventually, Naruto told her. His words caused Uzume to smile, and seeing it, the blonde couldn't help but smile in return. As the food finally disappeared and everyone began to feel full from eating, Mia started to stand so she could take care of the dishes. However, before she could even move from her sitting position, Naruto stood up and began grabbing the dishes. Naruto-san, you really don't need to do this, Mia told the blonde as he made to grab hers. You're right, I don't, Naruto agreed. However, you made dinner, I think it's only right that someone else clean up so you can do something you enjoy more than cleaning dishes. Besides, I like being useful. I would hate to just pay for living here, yet be required to do nothing to help with the upkeep of the house. Mia looked at him for several seconds, an unidentifiable expression on her face. After several seconds she closed her eyes and smiled. Well, when you put it like that. Naruto grinned as he grabbed her plate and began moving towards the door. Naruto-sama, Musubi will help too. Musubi said as she stood up and followed Naruto into the kitchen. As the door behind them shut, Kaguri leaned over towards Mia and whispered. Are you sure about this? Letting those two stay here, I mean? You don't even know them. Mia looked from the door to Kaguri before smiling. I may not know them, but I don't think it really matters. When I look at the two of them I can see something wonderful forming. That man, Naruto, there's something special about him, more so than anyone I've ever met. She looked back at the door as Naruto and Musubi walked out. What do you see? Asked Kaguri, looking from Mia to the Ashikabi and his Sekirei. Once more, his hand came up and began to absently scratch his chest. I see the ability to change fate. Kaguri looked at Mia in surprise, then spared a glance at the door as Naruto and Musubi came back inside the room after cleaning the dishes. He sat down and began speaking with Uzume and Musubi about the many places he had been to, and Kaguri had to admit there was nothing overly wrong that he could see about the guy. Naruto just seemed like your friendly, run-of-the-mill teenager, albeit, he looked a lot sturdier and well-built than most teenagers. Maybe you're right. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with him. And I guess there's not much point in me protesting since it seems you've already made up your mind. Kaguri stood up soon after saying that and left the room. Mia watched the pair, Naruto sitting in a cross-legged position, using one arm as support to keep himself upright, while the other was wrapped around Musubi who was leaning into his side. They were sitting down next to Uzume and the blonde seemed to be telling them a story about his travels, something about how an aircraft he was on crashed just off the shore of New York due to an engine malfunction and they ended up having to swim to the Statue of Liberty to keep from freezing in the water. Naruto-san, she said to get his attention. Where exactly are you two living right now? We actually aren't living anywhere, Naruto admitted sheepishly. I had rented out a hotel for 2 nights before we found the sign for this place. Oh, so you have to move in right away, Mia said, then she blinked. Wait, where is all your stuff? Well, aside from those bags we brought, I don't have much, Naruto said, pointing to the bags he had set off to the side of the room. Those bags contain all of our clothes. Other than that we don't have much of anything. Since I traveled so much, I rarely had anything more than what's already on my back and whatever money I made during my travels. But Naruto, all that's in those bags are my MMPH, said Blonde placed his hand over Musubi's mouth before she could finish her sentence. The two other females in the room looked at the pair oddly, but Naruto ignored them for the moment. SHHH, Naruto whispered in her ear. I know, but there are some things about me that I don't want anyone to know about yet. I'll show you where I keep all of my stuff later, but since I don't really know anyone else here I'm not ready to trust them with this. Okay. Okay, Musubi's voice came out muffled. Sorry. Naruto smiled and kissed her cheek to let the Sekirei know he wasn't angry or anything. This had the effect of causing Uzume to smirk. You two seem awfully close. Of course we are. Musubi said proudly. He's my Ash, MMPH. She means I'm her boyfriend, Naruto said with a laugh that sounded disturbing, similar to the ones his sensei Jiraiya used to give when he found himself in a brothel surrounded by beautiful women intent on stealing his money. Uzume looked at him strangely before shrugging his act off as just him being weird like everyone else in the house. Mia on the other hand had a smile on her face, as if she found the act of her new tenants amusing. Remember, Naruto whispered into Musubi's ear. We're not supposed to tell anyone about the Sekirei plan, and while I don't actually care about what that man wants, I don't know enough about MBI to risk being chased after. Right, sorry, Musubi said apologetically. She looked down at the table in slight depression, and Naruto couldn't help but wince. Why did he feel so guilty about scolding this girl? Don't worry about it, Naruto said as he took his hand from her mouth and placed it in her own. Musubi looked down at their entwined hands, then back up at Naruto, blinking a few times before smiling and squeezing his hand. If nothing else, she was easy to please and distract. Well, since you two need to move in right away, I'm afraid I won't be able to clean the room for you, Mia said with an apologetic expression. Naruto looked over at her and grinned. Don't worry about it, I wouldn't want you to go through so much trouble just for us anyways. I'll clean the room tonight, not like I have many other things I can do right now. And sleep is overrated anyways. Mia giggled at his enthusiasm. Very well, why don't I show you to your room now? That would be nice, Naruto said, standing up as Mia did. Just as Musubi stood up, she remembered something important and pressed the bottom of her fist into her hand. I just remembered, she said, loudly enough to gain the attention of everyone in the room. However, the brunette ignored them as she looked at Naruto. So now that we've found a place to live, can you tell me what sex is like you promised? The room became silent as everyone's stare moved from Musubi to Naruto. The blonde froze as he found himself the center of attention from his new and amused housemates. Mia had given what Naruto would later realize was her catchphrase, and Uzume had, after gawking for several seconds at the other brunette's audacity to ask such a question in public, gained a large grin on her face. Even Kaguri seemed to be taking some form of twisted pleasure at seeing him uncomfortable. Well, Naruto's face gained a red hue as he wondered how he would get out of this situation. He had honestly hoped she had forgotten about that promise, because really, telling a fully grown woman about sex was not only awkward, but extremely embarrassing. What's this, you don't know what sex is? Asked Uzume, a sly look on her face. No, I don't, Musubi said, shaking her head. Is it something bad? Naruto-sama said it was a way to show affection, but we were pressed on time so he wouldn't tell me anything more than that. Uzume looked from Naruto to Musubi before grinning. Well, sex is. Excuse me, Mia said with a smile as the feeling of death hovered in the air again. Naruto could not be sure if it was just him, but it looked like wisps of purple energy were leaking from the woman's being. But you know I don't approve of such inappropriate and explicit behavior. That includes talking about things that are inappropriate and explicit as well. Uzume paled as she backed away from the frightening woman. Alright. The aura of dread vanished and Mia looked at a sweat-dropping Naruto and a confused Musubi with a smile. Now, why don't I show you two to your room? XOX. This is where you will be staying, Mia said. She swept her left arm around, as if to encompass the entirety of the room she was in. Naruto smiled as he set the bags on the floor and looked around. The room wasn't really all that dirty, just a little dust that accumulated for the day. It was a fairly plain room, with a green tatami floor, white paper walls, a closet with a wooden door and 2 windows. It was simple but nice. Thank you, he said, turning to Mia and bowing. I appreciate all you've done for Musubi-chan and I. Mia giggled behind her hand. There's no need to thank me. I was more than happy to set you up, and it will be nice to have more company around here. Anyways, I'll leave you two alone while you get settled in. Once you two are done, head downstairs and I'll have some tea prepared for you. Right, thank you, Naruto said while Musubi added her own exuberant thank you. Mia giggled some more before leaving the room. When the door closed behind her, the blonde waited until he heard her footsteps disappear, then turned to his Sekirei partner. Musubi, what you are about to see here is something I have not shown to anyone else in a very long time. I am trusting you not tell anyone else about what you see here. Do you understand? Musubi saw how serious her Ashikabi was about this, and with that in mind knew that what he was about to show her was big. Really there was no choice in her mind about what to do. Of course, Naruto-sama, I will never reveal your secret to anyone. Thank you, Naruto sighed as he held his hands in a single hand seal, confusing Musubi greatly, wondering why he was making such a weird hand sign. At least until she saw what happened next, then she became shocked. Kage Bunjin no Jutsu. There was a puff of smoke and when it cleared several Narutos were standing in the room instead of one. Almost as one they began moving, a few of them went through more hand seals and actually transformed into dusters and other cleaning utilities. Meanwhile the ones that didn't transform began to clean. Naruto-sama. What is this? Are you a MMPHMMM? Please keep quiet, Naruto said softly as he smothered her mouth with his hand. Hopefully no one heard her shout, or at least would just think she tripped because he did not want to explain this to his housemates. At least not yet, not until he was sure he could trust them. If someone hears you causing a big commotion they may come here to investigate. He looked at her intently. I'll tell you everything you need to know, I promise. Musubi quickly nodded and Naruto took his hand off of her mouth. Musubi watched as Naruto knelt down and unrolled a scroll, her mind awhirl with questions. I don't understand how he can be doing this. The professor always said that humans don't have special powers that Sekireis do. Yet I know Naruto-sama is human because he's my Ashikabi, so how? How does he have this power? Now Musubi wasn't exactly the smartest tool in the shed, nor the sharpest kunao of a set. But even she could tell that what Naruto was doing was not normal for a human, or even a Sekirei for that matter. She had never even heard of a Sekirei that could make physical copies of itself and have said clones transform into cleaning objects. She couldn't help but ask herself. Just who was Uzumaki Naruto? Naruto finished unrolling the scroll and Musubi could see that it had kanji on it, though they looked slightly different than the kind she was taught to read when she was staying at the lab. He pressed his hands against it and like when the blonde created those clones, she could feel the small drain on the blonde's power, which until now she had thought was there exclusively for her to use as a power boost when they kissed. Apparently that was not the case, or at least not the case with Naruto. I wonder, can other Ashikabis do this? Or is this something only Naruto-sama can do? Musubi wondered as she watched the scroll emit a puff of smoke as several items appeared from within the scroll, several different pairs of clothes that were obviously for Naruto, a large air-soft mattress with a red blanket that had a nine-tailed fox on it, a worn book, and a picture frame. While the clones finished cleaning, dispelling in another puff of smoke when they finished, the real Naruto began setting up the mattress. Looking around, Musubi noticed his clothes lying on the ground and the bags with her clothing off to the side. Smiling, she decided to help Naruto and went over to the bags, picked them up and walked to the closet. Sliding the door open, she stepped inside and began hanging up her clothes, humming a tune to herself. When she finished, the brunette Sekirei grabbed Naruto's clothes and did the same thing with his. By the time she was done, all of the clones had dispelled and the original Naruto was finished setting up the bed. The blonde shinobi looked at her and smiled as he patted the spot beside him on the bed. Come here and I'll tell you what you want to know, he said. Musubi smiled as she bounded over to him and sat down. Out of a new growing habit and desire for intimate contact, the whiskered marked blonde grabbed his Sekirei's hand and idly began playing with her fingers. My people were a very special group of select individuals called shinobi, Naruto began. Shinobi, better known as ninja in this day and age, were people that were taught how to harness the energy of the human body. Energy, of the human body, said Musubi, blinking several times as she wondered what he meant. I didn't even know humans have energy. Can they all use it like you do? No, Naruto shook his head. While all humans have this energy, the ability to use it has long since been lost to everyone but me. Nowadays humans only have enough to keep themselves alive. The name of this energy source is called chakra, which is comprised of a combination of the physical energy of the body which can be found in every cell, and spiritual energy which was gained through experience and learning new things. By utilizing a set of hand seals based on the 12 zodiac animals, chakra can be channeled through the seals to create powerful techniques, Naruto answered her question. Then those copies you made was one of those techniques? Musubi said in a moment of insight. Yes, that particular technique was the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which evenly splits my chakra between myself and all of the clones I make. There are many other techniques, however, some of them far more powerful than that one. So then, your people must be really strong warriors, Musubi said. They were, Naruto said with a sad smile. Musubi gave him a beautiful smile. I would really like to meet them. You can't, the blonde told her, making Musubi look at him in confusion. He shook his head and said, I'm the last shinobi left in this world. The rest of my kind have long since perished. Oh no. Musubi placed a hand over her mouth. Looking at the blonde's depressed face, she couldn't help but feel ashamed of herself. How could she say something so callously? Naruto-sama, I'm so sorry. It's okay, Naruto said with a shrug. They died a long time ago. However, as long as I'm still alive, I carry their dreams, and in a way they still live through me. I really miss them, but I won't let myself feel down about something that happened so long ago. I have to continue living my life as best I can. For them if not for myself. Musubi smiled as she looked at the blonde. He was so strong, much stronger than she had even thought he could be. She brought his hand over to her face and held it in both of hers. Closing her eyes she said, I really am so very lucky to have you as my Ashikabi. I already knew you were thoughtful and kind, but to think you're so strong. She opened her eyes and smiled as she pressed her lips against his hand. Naruto-sama, I am so happy to be your Sekirei. This girl. Naruto thought to himself as he stared at the young woman in surprise. Ever since I've met her I've felt like I'm back where I belong, like I've come home. She just seems to evoke all of these emotions in me naturally. She's become, precious to me, the first precious person I've had in over 2,000 years. It's been so long since I've had someone to love, I've forgotten what it felt like. He was honestly surprised by the feeling. Not just because he was feeling it, but also because it had only taken a few days before it came over him. In less than 2 days this woman had become important to him, a precious person, one of the first he had had in a long time. God, there must be something wrong with him if he was getting so attached to another person so easily. He wasn't even sure if he could blame it on his lack of human contact or the bond he had formed with her. There was just something about Musubi that made him feel this strange sense of nostalgia and belonging that he hadn't felt with anyone else since the Fourth Great Shinobi War. Was this similar to his own ability? Naruto remembered people would often tell him that he had the ability to change the hearts of others, to make them believe in him. He remembered Tsunade was saying that he made people want to believe in him, to feel that if they put their hopes, their trusts and their dreams with him, then they would never go wrong. He stopped his thoughts there, on those happy memories. That way he wouldn't remember the dark times that came after. He wouldn't remember how he failed them. Naruto-sama. Musubi's voice snapped Naruto out of his trance. He looked over to see her concerned expression. Are you all right? You're crying. Naruto sniffed a bit as he wipes at his eyes. He looked at his fingers, noticing the water droplets on them. Had he really gotten so emotional that he had started crying? Apparently so. Wiping at his eyes some more he realized that there was more wetness on them, small tracks of water that ran down his face. I guess I am, he said, blinking again when Musubi began wiping away the tears off his cheeks. He caught her hand in his own, his movements so fast they startled her. Naruto-sama, she asked. Thank you, Naruto whispered, kissing her palm. He let go of her hand and placed it over his shoulder. He scooted himself closer to her until his body was touching hers, wrapped an arm around her and pulled her into him. The blonde placed a kiss on her lips, closing his eyes as wings spread out on Musubi's back and folded as they conformed to the ceiling. Musubi didn't hesitate to return his kiss, applying more pressure to their connected lips. She opened her mouth and let her tongue move into his, which had opened as if sensing her intention. Their tongues clashed, battling for dominance, and Musubi enjoyed how it felt, the feeling of pleasure the blonde gave her, the effects it had on her body, and the way her emotions for the man she was kissing went from a calm sea to a raging storm of desire, she enjoyed all of it. They only stopped when the need for air became a necessity. The two looked at each other for several long seconds, before Naruto cracked a grin and Musubi smiled. Both of them broke out laughing, though there didn't seem to be any reason for it other than perhaps the happiness both felt when with each other. "We should probably head downstairs now," Naruto said. "Oh, right." Mia-san said something about tea. Musubi exclaimed. "Well, come on." Naruto stood up, grabbed Musubi's hand and helped her stand as well. "Let's get going." "Yes, Naruto-sama." XOX. Within a small room filled to the brim with computers and electronics, an unknown figure whose face remained hidden due to the fact that the only lighting in the room came from the equipment stared at the image of Naruto and Musubi. The only thing that could be seen of this person was their general outline, which was that of a woman, and the gleam of the glasses on her face. All the computers around this figure held images of Naruto and Musubi, and any information that this person had been able to pull up on him. "So Sekirei number 88 and her Ashikabi are now living in Izumo Inn," the figure said in a female voice. "It's too bad they moved in right away, now I'll have to wait until they leave to bug their room. Still, now that he's here I have a feeling that things are going to be interesting." Yufufufufu.